Yes, Lord, yes, Lord, yes, yes, Lord. Yes, Lord, yes, Lord, yes, yes, Lord. Amen. We say yes, Lord, yes, Lord, yes, yes, Lord. Yes, Lord, yes, Lord, yes, yes, Lord. Yes, Lord, yes, Lord, yes, yes, Lord. Amen. Now we are going to do la 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 la. La 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 la. La 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 la. La 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 la. Amen. La 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 la. La 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 la. La 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 la. Hallelujah. Thank God. Thank God. Hallelujah, Jesus. आइए हम अपने आवाज़ों को उठाएं प्रभु के लिए। जिंदा खुदा बने, उसकी आराधना करें। Give thanks with a grateful heart. Give thanks to the Holy One.
Give thanks because it's given Jesus Christ, His Son. Give thanks to the grateful heart. Give thanks with the Holy One. Give thanks because it's given Jesus Christ, His Son. And now let the weak say, I am strong. Let the poor say, I am rich, because of what the Lord has done for us. And now let the weak say, I am strong. Let the poor say, I am rich, because of what the Lord has done for us. Give thanks. धन्यवाद आभारी दिल से, धन्यवाद उसको जो पवित्र, धन्यवाद क्योंकि वो दिया यीशु ने अपना भोग और करे मंजूर मैं धन्यवाद, करेगा गरीब मैं धन्यवाद, उसके कारण जो उसने किया हमारे लिए, ओ धन्यवाद। धन्यवाद करते हैं प्रभु, आगे के समय को आपके हाथों में सौंपते हैं प्रभु। जो हम सीखते हैं प्रभु बिजनेस मीटिंग में प्रभु, हम चाहते हैं प्रभु हम जो भी सीखते हैं प्रभु तेरे हाथों में सौंपते हैं। हम कुछ अपने जीवन में नया सीख नहीं पाएंगे यीशु मसीह। आगे के समय को आपके हाथों में सौंपते हैं, मांगते तेरे प्यारे बेटे यीशु मसीह के नाम से आमीन।
So I think the next thing that we want to talk about is something that we call servant leadership. There's a lot of people, there's a lot of books written on it, there's a lot of leaders who talk about servant leadership. the servant leadership content that I'm going to present to you is my own content, right? Rather than studying a book or reading a book, right? This information that I'm sharing with you is information that I've observed, right? I grew up with a servant in the house. So I observed that servant. I observed the attributes of that servant. And so what I'm going to be talking about today is the attributes that I actually observed from a servant so that I can give that to you. And a lot of this information that I'm going to share may not be new information, but it will start to open some doors in your mind. It will open some windows. It will open some windows for you to be able to say, wow, I didn't think of this as an attribute of a servant. So we'll get into it. So in Matthew chapter 9, 35 to 38, it says, Jesus went through all the towns and villages, teaching in their synagogues, proclaiming the good news of the kingdom, and healing every disease and sickness. When he saw the crowds, he had compassion on them because they were harassed and helpless like sheep without a shepherd. Then he said to his disciples, the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. Ask the Lord of the harvest, therefore, to send out workers into this harvest field. So as we talk about servant leadership, we're actually thinking about the harvest. Because again, remember we talked about the fact that to be a leader, the most important way to think about leadership is influence, right? The most important part about leadership is influence, and so we're going to talk about that. So the first attribute of a servant is a servant does not have an agenda. Think about that. A servant does not have their own agenda. Their agenda is the master's agenda. Right? So if you think about the servant that was in her house, she did not cook what she wanted to cook. Or her time was not her time. Her time was her time, and the instruction was given by my mother. So think about that. Right? Many times, as leaders, we want to have an agenda. Right? But as a servant, your agenda is for the person that you're serving, not your own. Right? So as you think about being a servant, you have to recognize that we have to give up our own agenda and to take on the agenda of somebody else. In my book, I talk about the second fiddle in cricket. Right? A second fiddle is somebody who is playing the second part, not the major role. Sometimes in life, we want to be the main attraction. We want to be the main person. But as a servant, right, my agenda is to take care of the person who's giving the instruction. So that becomes the agenda. So does that make sense? Right, so a servant does not have their own agenda. A servant is somebody who is very agile. I remember the servant in our house, when she came to work for us, there was a lot of things that she did not know, but she learned. She was a quick learner, right? And sometimes, like she was maybe cooking, all of a sudden I would come and say, Maheshwari, can you iron my shirt for me? She would stop what she was doing and iron my shirt, or get me some water, right? So when you're a servant, you have the ability to be agile. You have the ability to multitask. Again, these are all beautiful attributes of a servant that I actually observed in my house. Number 3, the servant is somebody that is aware. In my house, if you needed something, if you wanted to know where my mother was, or my father was, or where the children were, or where something was, I need the scissors. I need something else. They always knew where everything was. You know, so when you're a servant, you're somebody that is aware of the surroundings. You're not just so focused on what you're doing that you're not thinking about everything else. So somebody who's a servant, like I remember, like when you go to a restaurant, right? If somebody is serving you, right? If they're paying attention to you, right? They will know when your water is done, when you're finished eating, right? You have to be aware, right? So somebody who's a servant is fully aware of what is going on around you. In order to be aware, you have to be others focused, right? If you're constantly thinking about yourself, you cannot be aware of others. So, Pastor Alex, you were talking about being a marketer, right? To be a marketer, you have to be aware of what is going on out there, right? So not only to be a servant, right? You're a veterinary person, right? To be aware about what are the animals, right? Understanding what are the pets, what are their needs, what is the time frame, right? Really thinking, so even to be a good marketer, you have to have this understanding of awareness, right? I tell my children, situational awareness is very important. You don't have to be aware all the time, but there are sometimes you have to put everything down. Put your phone away, put everything away so that you can pay attention, right? So being aware is a very important attribute. Somebody who can anticipate, again, not only a good servant, but if you're a good marketer, if you're a good entrepreneur, you have to anticipate. You have to anticipate the need, right? You don't have to wait till somebody tells you. You know, our servant, she was very good. She knew as soon as my father came home, he would like a cup of tea, right? In South Asia, they're very good at this. You don't have to be told every time you need something. Good servants, they know how to anticipate. And this is also true for entrepreneurship. Right? For somebody who's willing to be a servant, if you're willing to put others first, if you're willing to pay attention, right? I talk about this even with regard to watching the bowlers arm. I talk about this, like when I was feeling in the slips, for those of you who are cricket fans, I dropped 3 catches in my first match. I was 10 years old. And my father wasn't there, he was in the army, he called me. He said, "Mahan, how did you do?" I said, "I got 3 catches." He said, "Son, watching the bat is not enough. You need to watch the bowler's arm." So what he was telling me was, as a fielder, I was watching the bat. He said, "You watch the bowler's arm. In the slips, if you watch the bowler's arm, you have a little bit more, you're paying attention to how the ball is being bowled, you're watching it into the bat and into your hand. So you have a little bit more time to anticipate." That is what we're talking about. Not much time, but that little time. So if you think about it in life, right, you get clues as to what is going to happen next. So this is how you understand. So in marketing, I studied something called consumer behavior. One of the most important subjects I studied is consumer behavior. And a lot of people think that marketing is an art, that it's creating stuff. Like brother, he was saying in photography. So a lot of photography is an art. But I'm sure I don't know photography at all. I just know to hold the phone and shoot. But even in photography, there is a scientific side of it. There is, even in creativity, there is science. There is a method, right? So my degree is in marketing, but my degree in marketing is a Bachelor of Science in marketing. Means there is a lot of data, right? So when there is data, not only can you study the data of what is happening in the past, but you should be able to use that data to predict. So if you think about AI, right? I'm in India, right? The IT capital of the world, right? When you think in terms of AI, when you think in terms of Internet of Things, what are they trying to do? They're trying to anticipate based on past models, right? So this understanding of anticipation, what they are trying to get machines to do, right? We as human beings, it's important for us to do. And sometimes when you anticipate, you're going to make mistakes, but it's okay. That's how you learn. Does that make sense? Especially when you're studying business, or you're studying customer behavior, you're studying parents, and you're thinking in terms of what is in. So, Alex, a good way to think about this is many times we think in terms of a customer, but that customer has a customer. We did talk a little bit about this earlier. I'm sorry for doing that. So sometimes we think, if you think about cereal, or you think about toys, right? If you think about cereal, right, the people in the stores, they put the cereal in the eye level of the children. Because the person who's making the decision on who is buying the cereal is not the parent, it's the child. So the customer is really the child. But in your case, the people who are paying the bill is the parents. So sometimes you have to think in terms of what is important to the parent, right? What is the finished product that the parents are looking for? The children are well behaved, the children are well rounded, right? So part of this thing is to change the game too. Right? If the children are only studying science and math and everything else, you say, listen, maybe we should take them for swimming class. You know, let me tell you something. To learn how to swim is a very important thing. I don't know whether Indore doesn't have sea close by, right? Did you have a sea coast in Indore?
No.
Right. You have rivers close by?
Yes.
Right? If you have access to a swimming pool, right, maybe you start taking your children for swimming lessons. Because I'm telling you, to learn how to swim is a good life lesson. You understand what I'm saying? So I'm teaching you to think outside the box a little bit. They're thinking education, you're thinking extracurricular. Right? And when you first do it, when you anticipate, sometimes people don't necessarily appreciate it right away. Some things take time to develop. When I created my model to tell the US military that they needed this process, they didn't even realize they had a problem. Or they knew they had a problem, but they had problems in pockets. Right? But what I did was I created a solution and made them aware of their problem. Right? And then said, here is a solution. So they had a headache, I created a Tylenol for the headache. Do you understand? So part of anticipating, so in order for to be a marketer is very similar to being a servant. You have to learn to anticipate the demand and then say, okay, how can I meet that need? Right? When you are meeting that need, if you think about it, you're actually serving people. Accommodate. Right? A servant is somebody who always accommodates. Right? I was telling you earlier about the man who owned the donkey. He may have had a plan for that donkey that day. Right? But when Jesus wanted it, he said, it's yours. Right? We're always willing to accommodate. I'm saying some of the same things, but it's important that we get this deep into our spirit. When you say you're accommodating somebody, you're willing to pay second fee. It's a great example of being a servant. Somebody with a lot of ability, right? Not just somebody who can do one thing. You know, the beautiful thing about pastors is, pastors know how to do a lot of things well, right? You become well-rounded. If you look at with Indian cricket team, right? If you're an all-rounder, if you can field well, if you can bat well, if you can bowl well, guess what? You're more important to the team, right? So somebody who's not pigeonholed, you know the word pigeonhole? Pigeonhole meaning you are just able to do one thing, right? You want to learn to have the ability to be able to do a lot of different things. And to be an entrepreneur, you have to be able to do a lot. You need to be able to sell, you need to be able to arrange, you need to be able to clean, you need to be able to do the accounts. There's a lot of different things you have to do, right? But it's all worth it. It's all worth it. To be a servant is worth it, and ability is important. Acquire. You need to be able to acquire new skills, new talent, new ability. Constantly in that position. Like I remember when our servant came, I didn't think she even knew what a fridge was. I don't think she knew what an iron was. I don't think she knew what a microwave was. You understand what I'm saying? But my servant, she learned how to use all of those things. Right? So if a servant can do that, if a house servant can do that, can we learn to do new things? Right? So it's just very important. And so whether you are serving in the church or whether you're serving in the marketplace, when you are able to be this flexible, you will become much more valuable person. And young person, right, you're starting to think about work, right? It's just very important for you to be extremely flexible. Allow the people to pour into you. Just say, what can I do next? I already see that you are a very gentle spirit, right? So use that and allow somebody to pour into you, because this is the way that God is going to prepare you. Remember I told you I didn't grow up in a house that understood prophet. So how did I learn all of these things? Today I can tell you very honestly, I'm 59 years old. There is not one issue that I face that I don't feel like I'm prepared to face. And I don't say that because I'm proud. I'm saying that with humility. Because it is God's grace, right? The Bible says, Ephesians 2:10, we are His workmanship. So what does He do? Workmanship, He creates, He molds, He makes, He takes all those rough things out, right? So it's a beautiful thing that as we are flexible and as we learn new skills, God is able to take everything and to teach us. So when I asked Him, God, why did you not put me in marketing? He said, you didn't need that. I gave that to you. So you already naturally have the ability to do these things. But I had to teach you everything else, because the truth of the matter is, in order to run a successful business, you have to be good at a lot of different things. If you can only do marketing, that's not enough to be a successful business person. So, when you are asked to do different things, don't complain, don't mumble, don't murmur, because God has a plan. Because He's going to use that. He's creating that workmanship. I'm not saying that you are. I don't see anybody here that is going to complain. I don't see that. I think people in India, people in Sri Lanka, in Pakistan, and Bangladesh, we are very flexible, we are very malleable. We like to be like clay. That we are willing to be transformed, right? But don't be discouraged by it, right? Because God is doing a big work, right? You're a young person, right? You have a beautiful spirit. God is going to use that, right? But just continue to be willing to walk to that next door. Be like that servant. This is a microwave. This is a fridge. This is a washing machine. They didn't know any of that, right? So if a servant can do that, God can certainly expect us to do that, right? Good word. Somebody who's anonymity. I'm going to give you a good example of this. My mother, she would make a very good chocolate biscuit pudding. Chocolate biscuit pudding is layers of biscuit and layers of chocolate cream. It's very, very, one of my favorite desserts. My mother learned how to make it. And then, guess what? She taught the servant how to do it. Right? So when visitors come, right, and we serve the dessert, the visitors will say, Saro. My mother's name was Sarojini. They say Sarojini or Saro. The chocolate biscuit pudding was fantastic. My mother didn't turn around and say, oh no, the servant made it. Right? She said, oh, thank you very much. Right? But who made that dessert? The servant. Right? So somebody who's got anonymity means that you are not interested in getting the credit. Our servant was not interested in getting the credit. All she wanted to do was, my mother said, make us chocolate biscuit pudding. She made the chocolate biscuit. Was not thinking about taking the credit for it. So as part of our responsibility as a servant, like again, is God is the one who judges our heart, right? But we need to learn to be able to take every responsibility and to be anonymous. What do you think about that? I purposely, my wife had gone for a pedicure, so I went and I asked him to take a picture of that. Because the word servant and leadership, if you think about it, are two extremes. When you think about a servant, you think humble, you think no agenda, somebody who's willing to just do what you're supposed to do, somebody who's a leader, who's strong, who's fierce, who's bold, who's standing in front, giving the orders, giving instructions, right? So what are these two things that are so diametrically opposed? Servant and leadership came together because of one person, right? And that person is Jesus, right? And what did he do? If you think about it, right? I actually gave this message in America. In America, they're not used to seeing feet like this. But if you think about it, the feet that Jesus washed was like that. It was not nice shoes, right? Everything was perfect. No, he washed filthy feet, right? And he was willing to do that. So he's the example for that. Just a little trivia. I don't know whether you know this, but in Sri Lanka, there are more people that die because of snake bites than any other place in the world. And a big reason for that is because people walk barefooted. And in the night, the snake, it comes on the road so that it can stay warm when it's cold, and so they get bitten. Right? And so because people don't wear shoes, right, they get bitten. So just a quick example of that. So let's talk about a little bit about attributes of a leader. We talked about some, but we'll talk a little bit about somebody who's hospitable. Again, I have had a lot of hospitality in India. I was in Nepal. People are extremely hospitable. People in Sri Lanka. If you go to Sri Lanka, has anybody been to Sri Lanka? Sri Lankan people are extremely hospitable. Even if they don't have a lot, they'll give you a cup of tea. They won't ask you, just like in India, right? We don't ask. Like in America, people will ask you before they serve you. Something I had to get used to being married to an American. Because Americans like to be asked, would you like a cup of tea? Would you like some water? Would you like a drink? But in our culture, right, we serve first, right? They're extremely hospitable. So hospitality is very, very important as a servant. Somebody who is very discerning, right? Somebody who is very discerning. So when somebody comes to your house, if a servant is discerning, they'll be very careful before they give information to somebody. Am I right? Right? People who work in our house, they're very good about being discerning. So discernment is very important to be somebody who's a leader. Somebody who's actionable. So we're talking about, as we did this, we actually started transitioning into attributes of a leader rather than a servant. So a leader is hospitable, a leader is discerning, a leader takes action, right? So a leader just doesn't talk, right? Faith in action. A leader is somebody who's willing to do something. A leader is also willing to take risk. A leader is willing to teach, right? One of the main reasons why Jesus was considered the leader of all leaders was because he was able to mentor 12 disciples, then he took on the world, right? So being able to mentor is very important. And I will also say this, the most beautiful thing about Jesus was he went, when I talk about Zacchaeus, I talk about the fact that, Jesus, when he went into that town, he could have gone to anybody's house for that meal, but he chose Zacchaeus. Right? So I would ask you, who are the Zacchaeuses in your life that you have to stop and spend time with? Right? We are very willing to spend time with people who are important. But every one of us has a Zacchaeus in our life. And are we willing to take the time to be able to mentor somebody? I truly believe that part of the reason why God has given me so much opportunity is because I am able to mentor the people that work for me. Right? So they don't only work for a paycheck. I'm constantly speaking into their lives about what they should be doing next. You understand what I'm saying? I'm not afraid to do that. By God's grace, He has given me ability. He has shown me my past performance. I have done this before and I've been successful at it. So I'm continuing to do that. I'm rinsing and repeat. I continue to repeat those things that I am good at. And part of that is to be able to speak into young people's lives. So those of you who are leaders, those of you who want to be leaders, don't be afraid, because you are that person of influence that God has put in there to be able to influence others. Leaders are transparent, right? We need to be able to talk about our failures. We need to be able to talk about our mistakes. When I lost that job in 2000, it was because I said a lie. I shouldn't have said something and I said it, and they found out about it and they let me go. When I speak at large conferences, I actually talk about that. I talk about the fact that I made a mistake, that I took ownership for that mistake. As leaders, we need to be able to be transparent. We need to be able to speak. Like I told you, when I started my company, things were very rocky between me and my wife. Because my wife, like most women, they are wired to not to take risk. They cannot necessarily deal with a lot of risk. The instability of not having a paycheck. These are very difficult things. But I'm willing to speak to that. I don't sugarcoat that. Right? Because if I sugarcoat that, then somebody else cannot learn, somebody else cannot be encouraged. So it's very important for us to be transparent. Not with everybody, but with the people that God has called us to be transparent with. Right? It's important. A leader is somebody who is accessible. Right? A leader is always willing to stop. Right? Jesus was always accessible to the people who needed access. It's a great way to think about leadership. Right? A leader is not from afar. A leader is right there, willing to listen, right? Willing to learn. A leader is confident. Right? It's very, very important to have confidence. Right? So another way of saying that for a Christian is as a person who is faith. Right? To be an entrepreneur, right, you must be confident. Even to be a servant of God, right, you have to have confidence. You know where your confidence comes from, right? The Bible says, I lift up my eyes to the hills. Where does my help come from? It comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. So as Christians, our confidence actually comes from God. It doesn't come from training. It doesn't come from, it doesn't come from qualifications. It comes primarily from God. Once God has called you, you need to be confident. And to be confident in what God has called you to do. If you're a photographer, right, you should be confident in that. And be willing to allow that to come out. When you're speaking, right, again, language is important, right? So part of being confident is to be able to speak the language of the marketplace, right? It's some of the things I'm teaching my children. If the customer calls something a certain thing, like in the Department of Defense, they have a lot of different terminology. it's important to learn the language of the customer. Right? Somebody will say the love language of the customer. Right? I know that our customers think and act a certain way. I know how to think and act and hook them in. Why? Because I have paid attention. I've thought about it. I really paid attention to it. Right? The words that I use. Right? The language that I use. The pictures. I post a lot on LinkedIn. I put a lot of pictures because you know why? I want to grab their attention. Right? So confidence comes from being competent too. When you're competent and you have skills, you know, you look at David, right? Why did David say, hey, let me be the one to go after Goliath? Because he had confidence, right? God had already prepared him, right? So it's just an important part of being a leader. We talked about this earlier, but people will tell you that leadership is actually spelled INFLUENCE. Leadership is about influence. If you cannot influence somebody, you cannot lead. And so part of how to win influence is by being a servant. Right? To pay attention, to have agility, to have ability. So, you know what I mean? As you think about these things, God will give you God will give you the ability to be able to think about this thing correctly. As you go back home, open your mind and say, God, how do I create influence with these parents? If you see, the important thing here is asking the right question. Right? So we don't want to ask questions that we already know the answer to. We want to ask difficult questions. Like I asked God, why did I have to sell this house? I don't know. I want to understand. I want to understand you. I want to learn about you. How great you are, how big you are. Right? So asking the right question. God, show me how to build influence with these parents. And guess what? As you open your mind and ask the right questions, God will start to give you the right answers. Leadership is spelled influence. Well, that brings me to the end of that. I went through fairly fast, fairly simple stuff. Questions? Again, I'll make sure that all of this information, I'll make sure that I give to Pastor and Pastor Sunny, I'll make sure I give it to you as well, so that this way you can